Hi, everyone, and welcome to our weekly webinar. Today, we're painting tubes, paint tubes. We're so excited that you joined. It's so nice to see familiar faces back, and we can wait to see the work. We're just coming out of an amazing collection of paintings that we're going to start posting of trees. And if you painted trees, please, 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 we ask you to sort of like finalize your stage so we can share your painting. We're very excited. And this is collection number 18. So I just can't believe it. It's 18 paintings. We're nuts. Hi, Jen.
Hi. I have to say, I'm so excited to see the paintings from today. I think they're going to be so beautiful. I can't
Yeah,
wait.
yeah, yeah. Yes, yeah. Thanks so much. And then we'll just probably find out more things about materials and stuff. So I'm so happy you're there to help us out. So thank you. And yes, so 18 collections. And so this wasn't easy to start with because I had to figure out exactly what I wanted. And I wasn't sure because, and that's precisely the reason why this material or this object escaped us. You know, we've done so many things around our homes, and yet we didn't actually do our one of our most important objects, the our tool, our main tool, one of our main tools. So yeah, I was just grabbing tubes, and I was thinking about the symbolism of the color. I just wanted to find out if I could just bring something that felt conceptually um, like a little secret door, and started arranging. Do I want to take a picture? Do you want to paint it from life? So all those things, they were very overwhelming, I have to say. So I'm just going to try to help you find or explain my thought process. And this is only sort of like one way, but that's why we just sent another email saying that you can take a picture of the material and then work from that. I love painting from life. I think there's an extra added challenge to that that I feel personally I want to take on, because otherwise, if I don't challenge myself, I feel like those sort of like muscles get atrophied. So I want to use observation. I want to use direct visual contact. I'm going to do my best to translate and think about composition. And then I will take a picture of it and I will work on it from the picture. So the structure will not change much because I want to make sure that my painting contains the structure from live. But then I'll use the photograph later to work off of the image source. So that's number one. It just depends on what you want to do. If you want to make your life easier, if you prefer, you know what, I'm not just gonna deal with the live thing and I'm just gonna do a photograph. That's totally fine as well. But that's what I just decided. I just want to exercise those observational muscles. Um, I didn't take a picture of the still life, but finally, yeah, I just put like a table. I'm sitting down. I don't have a lot of space, so I had to create a configuration that allowed me to have a view of the tube that I was happy with. I tried it on the cap, but then I have background. I wasn't sure, and I really enjoyed the idea of thinking of a negative space as a pictorial plane. Um, and what I decided to do, I have a bunch of like old dry pallets that I want to take to the hazardous disposal center, and I have them all in a box. And Jen, you mentioned a couple of weeks ago that it would be amazing to do an assignment or a series painting one of our palettes, which I think we will do because it's an amazing idea. But what I decided to do is to use one of the palettes as a base. Let me see if I can just give you a preview of um, a preview of my, so yeah, essentially this is what I'm gonna do. I mean, from a different point of view, I decided to do only one tube, and because I just think it just brings a very direct or a single focal point, and I want to simplify things. So a single tube, but then the background is an all palette. So I chose Ecru, a tube of like titanium buff, simply because it was the one that was more banged up and with more wrinkles and really sort of like statuesque. But that's gonna be my still life. So that's my thought process, and the next challenge is gonna be how to size, retrofit, uh, and reformat that view onto my 12 by 16. So let's start with the format 12 by 16 using cotton paper. We have been trying to absorb as much as possible information about the materials that we use. We are learning so much about what it's going to continue being in our toolbox and what is going to be on standby. The more we read about the cotton paper, the more we think it's one of the best surfaces. We learned that the actually semi-absorbent surface of cotton absorbs any filler from the paint. It absorbs solvents, it absorbs oils, it absorbs mediums, and then only the paint remains on top. So it's a great painting surface. The same thing happens with anything with gesso. The medium sort of like absorbs any extra filler from the paint, and then the pigment remains on top. So cotton paper, easy to store. We have 18 paintings in 1 year, so 18 canvases. It would be a little bit challenging to to store. Anyhow, so I'm just gonna go for it, and then I have to decide focal points and movement. Mostly one of the images that I liked is a single tube of paint with a lot of movement. And by the way, I'm using a rectangular shape. We were talking about formats the other day during colloquium, and how one of the painters used a circular format to paint a landscape and the amazing results that she got. We also talk about oval frames, oval shapes. We're using a rectangular one, and I'm using a landscape orientation. And I thought that conceptually that would be interesting, because last week with the cypress trees that I painted, I did a portrait orientation. So with this still life, I want to do a horizontal orientation, landscape. So I have to debate and talk to myself before I make the first line, because it's important to know what is that I want to feature. And I think certainly I just want to feature the tube, a large tube. So perhaps since I have a single tube, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to enlarge it. And I'm also, based on what I have, I think I'm going to try to just center it. So sometimes I like to place things lower because I like to give space above the objects. But maybe for this, I'm just going to center it. So yeah, I'm going to give it a try and see what happens. So first, I'm just going to set up the length of the tube. And that is important because that gives me a preview of the size compared to the format. If I start with silhouettes right away, what I'm going to get is too much detail and information right now, and it's going to be harder to change my mind. And if there's a place where we embrace um, uh, non or commitment issues, is our creative process. So commitment issues get a bad rap, and rightfully so, because they're very annoying. And as artists, I feel like they manifest in different aspects of our lives. But we truly believe that we have to be respectful of not committing too much at the beginning of the creative process. So that's why I did this sort of like marking. So the issue that I have is that the palette paper, the way I see it, the palette paper. Okay, so I have a different issue right now. So I think what I'm gonna do, because I felt like I wanted to create a palette paper that was infinite, that was kind of like cropped on the around the paper, but it's not that big. So perhaps what I'll do, I'm gonna set up parameters on this area right here, and I'll just set up the palette paper because I think that's gonna be probably, it's gonna give me another focal point, but I think that's gonna be okay. So, and then for the purposes of painting this from live, I think this perspective will just give me a less distorted photographic approach. Okay, so yeah. All right, so I'm just gonna do this more exaggerated. So I changed my mind. Instead of doing the tube, I think the palette paper will be a focal point. So I'm adding a new focal point to my composition. This is a little bit more vertical. Um, I'm also aware and careful about giving enough movement, compositional movement, that is, between this focal point and the edges. I don't want anything that feels too on the nose, flushed, or too close, so it feels like the border pulls it, or it feels off frame or not controlled enough. Um, yeah, I prefer to facilitate. I think, you know, this is something that speaks of ourselves as human beings. I feel I want to be generous in providing a sense of safety to the viewer. This is who I feel I am, or I try to be with other people. So that's why I want to leave space. That's why I'm really mindful of um, not obstructing the flow. All these things that seem superficial, they do connect with who we are as people. And so if you find that you want to be more on the disruptive side, or kind of like you want to be more playful and teasing the viewer, so then just do things more cropped, or play with that possibility. In my case, I feel this is who I am. It's so funny. We're just doing some nonsensical lines. This is who we are, and we can see that already in the beginning lines. So anyhow, that was a little bit too deep. um, okay, so that's the paper, and I'm just mindful of the diagonal lines, because we know that we tend to make lines that are either too close to horizontal or vertical axis. So diagonal lines, by the way, give you a sense of perspective. So I'm mindful not to make things too horizontal or vertical. We were just yesterday working on the Kamala Harris portrait, and then one of the images had an axis line that was heavily foreshortened, and yet the translation felt like really upright, and we had to modify the whole portrait to accommodate that change when we translate it. Um, so yeah, I think yeah, that's perfect. So yeah, but mindful of diagonal lines. And now that I have this, I think the parameters of um, the paint tube are just gonna completely change. Wow, this is just so strange. It feels so strange. Okay, let me see how this is gonna work, because that feels like really strange. Um, so I have to make some dramatic changes right now. And I'm drawing the tube taking into account the edges of the paper palette. And I may have to do some changes, but here we go. Yeah, I'm just gonna, all right. This is gonna be lower. It's already making adjustments. So the combination of the two elements helps me play or manipulate, mold, sculpt. And this is actually gonna get cropped outside. Wow. So perhaps I should have done the tube after all first. Um, yeah, well, maybe I'll just open this up and make it less defined. But as usual, the simpler the subject, the more deceptively complicated it is. So I just feel that this was really tricky. But I think I'm just getting to a place where the combination or the relationship between the tube and the paper may work. So my challenge is that I thought I had the surface, and then when I put the tube on it, I realized that the distances between the tube and the edges were totally off. So I found myself making the tube like larger and smaller, and I realized that that wasn't working. So I had to uh, merge or combine or multitask. I had to adjust the proportions of the tube with the distance between the tube and the edges, and that threw the entire composition off in a way. Um, so I'll have to just make some changes as I go with the edges because I just put so much emphasis on giving compositional movement around that I feel like now I'm just like letting this precisely do the opposite. This is too on the nose, and so is this area right here. Um, but I'm gonna try to bring some elements so it doesn't feel. Maybe I'll open up this area and I just sort of like blur it because I want to make sure that um, I still give some movement and I concentrate the focal point. Um, we cannot say this enough. This is one of the most important things in the entire process. How you arrange your focal points. First of all, what you decide what's going to be a focal point and how you will arrange them based on the format. There's so much that goes into this. And the reason why it's so important is because once we get too deep into it, we are narrowing our freedom of making adjustments. So naturally, it's not like we are set with this, but if we are working on it an hour and a half and then we think, oh, well, I should have done, it's harder to go back. So, and we shouldn't go back. So might as well give a little bit of thought on this stage because this is going to make your painting potentially on the right path to becoming really incredible without too much work, or putting your painting on a path that you will feel like you have to add a lot of detail in order to elevate it. And we've been there many times, all of us, where we have a composition. The composition, I think I could be completely frank with everyone here, does not work in the end. We didn't give enough thought, or we didn't anticipate like criteria that escaped us. And then we find ourselves trying to just sort of like prop up that painting with extra details or extra colors or extra um, values because we think that's going to compensate for the composition. And I'm here to tell you, the Russian ballet dancer is here to tell you that doesn't do it. You can't balance a bad composition. There, I used the word bad. You can't balance it. You can't get away with more fluff. When it's a bad composition, yeah, that's it. You're done. Okay, so I'm just gonna step back, look at the camera. I'm gonna go for it. who knows? I'm gonna go for it. All right. I just want, and we're doing the sketch, and since we are, I mean, we're becoming a little bit obsessive with materials, and on the way of learning about mediums and oils and solvents and brushes, we are coming across articles and blog posts from artists that are expanding our vocabulary, and they're using very traditional terms um, to define what we do in a different word. So I'm just gonna try to practice those new terms because I just think like it's so cool, and I, you know, some of them I've never heard of. Um, and we could argue what's the step, but exactly. So this is the sketching stage. I Maybe Jen, you can find out if there is either an Italian or, I mean, okay. First of all, disclaimer: we should be decolonizing painting, but we're just going back to French and Italian to describe things. Okay, so we'll have to decide later between you and I, Jen, if we want to decolonize or not. But for now, just if you can find out if traditionally the sketching stage, if it had
This is has a pretty
Eurocentric word.
name. Okay, got it.
Um, since I'm gonna use the palette, I don't know if it seems very ambitious right now. I may regret. This is gonna be a painting of regrets. I may regret this, but I'm gonna go for it. Just trying to go darker to lighter with shading. I'm not sure, but okay, so I'm just gonna go for it. Um, so we were just like in a conversation yesterday, and there was a reflection on sometimes understanding that the medium, our oil paint, gives us so much pleasure, and with the full definition of that word, but at the same time some uneasiness. And some people in the discussion were asking for help, saying, you know, how do you combine or deal or cope with the pleasure aspect of the medium and the uncomfortable ways the medium shows up and then confronts us. So it made me think of the portrait of Dorian Gray, in which the painting that he did, the painter did, when he sold or traded his immortality with the devil, or traded his soul with the devil in exchange of immortality. The main character. Was that the painting, every time he committed something bad, the painting started to deform itself, get like more monstrous and uglier, the more sins or bad things that he committed. So I feel like with our process, and I'm going to go to a place with our process, if we look at the stage too much, it's just going to turn into a Dorian Gray type of situation. The painting is going to start looking uglier and uglier. There's something about getting really caught up with looking at one stage that almost makes the stage morph into something that looks monstrous. So I'm saying this because I caught myself feeling that way with this. I know that's not going to happen, meaning like that's not going to be the case. But it's a lesson to be learned when we feel like the results of our medium are confronting us, and they're getting uglier and uglier. We think it's an illusion, it's a ghostly mirage. It doesn't happen, but we think it does. It becomes uglier and uglier. So we just have to stop ourselves from going down that rabbit hole and then just continue working. Okay, so I think that's good. Already the shading, it's helping me integrate the different focal points. So I'm deciding already not to add any edges here because I feel like if I do, I'm just going to bring more elements. Traditionally, there is a consensus among the purists to keep our compositions grouped in 3 main focal points or less. Oops. Let me see. Okay, so I don't know what happened. So I'm just going to try to keep or be aware of that traditional consensus, and I'm going to keep this tube as a one single focus, the palette as another focal point, I'm sorry, and then the background, I would consider this a third focal point. And I will decide how much of each I'm going to develop, how much detail I'm going to have. And that's something that I have to think of in an artistic way. So I'm not sure yet. I know that the 3 focus will not have the same definition. And I'm just going to try to remember that when I start working and then developing each of the focal points. It's not a bad idea to actually verbalize or articulate or write down, even if you can, sort of like do a little bit of a painting diary or the diary or the journal of this particular painting, and just write down focal points really briefly. So, or make a mental note. So in my case, tube, palette, background. And I'm going to keep it like that because I don't want things to be, again, with the spirit of not trying to overwhelm or trying to simplify or give space. I feel like that's one of the drives that makes me pick certain compositions. And it's important to reflect, not now because we're painting, on how your choice of compositions, of color, of narratives speak of you as a human being. Because I think the more you find that connection between your artistic criteria and who you are, the more you can hone in and really get the best of those criteria, if that makes any sense. Okay, so I'm ready for the wash. So this is a word that I was aware of. Imprimatura. Imprimatura is an Italian word that says the first stage. And I think imprimatura means sort of like the wash, the underpainting, if you will. So sometimes I get confused, and I don't know if imprimatura is really the wash or if it's really the first notes. And it just depends on the purist that you talk to. I feel like we could just mention that the first, or the wash, the staining, it's what has been traditionally called imprimatura. I think Laura could tell us later when we open the forum, I guess. She can tell us later if we are accurate or correct or not, because I know that she's used this word. I've heard Laura use this word before. So let's just go and decide that what we're going to do now, it's the imprimatura. I'm using a big brush. And Jen, any, oh, I need paint. So maybe we'll put the paint. You can tell us if you found any.
Sure. So I looked up the French word first. I mean, sorry, the Italian word first, and that came up pretty immediately, which and the National Portrait Gallery I think this is the London one. had this article about it. It feels like it's something that people say often. And I put it in the chat. It's, oh gosh, me pronouncing other words is so hard. Disegno, Disigno,
Diseño? No.
Diseño, maybe? That sounds
Oh,
right.
let me see. It's on the chat.
It's in the chat.
Diseño. It sounds like diseño. Oh, okay. So, and it's a word that you found like it's fairly conventional in.
It seems so, yes.
Okay. Diseño.
It says the Italian word for drawing or design. In this case, it involves both the ability to make the drawing and the intellectual capacity to invent the design.
Okay. And
Feels
it's is it applied to the painting process or is sort of like just to drawing?
oh, that's a great question. Okay, so then I posted in the pictures the whole little article about
Okay.
it.
Okay.
And it says, from the Renaissance, this ability to invent or create put the artist on a footing with God, my Lord,
Whoa.
the creator,
Jesus.
and was a means of raising the status of painting from craft to art. In Renaissance Italy, a dispute arose between the partisans of Michelangelo and those of Titian.
Yeah,
Titian,
Titian.
right? What is it?
I think it's Titian, or I don't know.
Titian. Okay.
I have no idea. I don't know.
You know much more than I, my friend, as to whether Disegno,
Yeah.
Michelangelo, or Colorito, Titian, was superior.
Okay.
So I wonder Colorito. I'll look up Colorito.
Okay.
I'm saying that wrong too.
Okay.
Full disclosure, you guys, Julio speaks, I think, 4 languages,
Oh.
and I barely speak my native tongue. So we always defer to Julio.
Yeah, right. No,
It's true. And then the French words was kind of more of like, this is how you would translate it. So
okay.
I put also a picture of them broken down. So the verb of sketch and all the French words, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 French words that could be used for the word sketch as a verb. And then I just put 5 nouns for the word sketch, but it kind of went on and on. So it doesn't seem like there's one overarching word that everyone uses. But
okay.
But I've listed what I do know, and I'll look at the colorito now.
Okay. Okay. So at the same time, I'm just putting paint. So imprimatura, if you want to find out what stage it's at, if it's closer to a wash or if it's closer to a first note. And I think it's also the Renaissance term when the painters started painting. I mean, these painters did so many steps and layers. And so they just kind of like named each. So that's a little bit crazy. But yeah, imprimatura is also, I've heard this many times in art school, the imprimatura, and no one knew exactly what exact stage of the painting it was, but I think it's a wash.
Okay, so it says, in painting, imprimatura is the initial stain, of color painted on a ground. That's what it says.
Okay.
It provides a painter with a transparent toned ground, which will allow light falling onto the painting to reflect through the paint layers. The term itself stems from the Italian and literally means first paint layer.
Perfect. All right. So we got one down. So I think that's good. And the diseño, I think that's a good one too. So but yeah, imprimatura, I think that's a good. Yeah. So thanks, Jen.
My pleasure.
So there's another one that's going to come later, and that one just keeps I'm fascinated, and I'm just going to tell you right now if you want to find out. But and by the way, I'll just put the whole thing for everyone, the article with all the this glossary of terms This one, it's a Bosch. Um, and let me see if I can just put it. So Jen and everyone, this is the article, and you're gonna see one that I've never heard before. Ebosh or Ebosh. I think it's Ebosh. Ebosh. So this feels like first notes, and a lot of painters, Velasquez, Rembrandt, they used this stage in which they used desaturated or neutral versions of color to start building the painting. So in order, before they even got into first notes, I would say there was a stage in which they colorize the painting, but going from darker to lighter. Yeah, using this like technique. But anyhow, so I'm just gonna go back to my imprimatura with solvent, and yeah, and I didn't realize that I'm gonna have to grab the tube actually and squeeze some ecru. Oh man, that is just too funny. I didn't create the palette, and I need ecru, so I'm just gonna do it right now. Okay, so I'm better doing it now than later. I think that was the composition. Yeah, maybe a little bit higher. All right, here we go. So I'm using solvent and a little bit of solvent, and I'm gonna do this. I think I'm making a decision right now. I'm gonna do this with gray. There's so much color on my composition that I feel I want to use a single color right now. And I'm debating between using gray or using burnt sienna. Um, Let me just do this thinking process one more time. No, I changed my mind. I'm gonna do burnt sienna, and I'm gonna do darker to lighter on the wash. And the reason is because the background, the iron board on the background, it's quite dominant. So I'm just gonna, with a little bit of solvent, a big brush. The idea is to create. We know that imprimatura or staining means to just prime the surface, seal the charcoal. Also, very important, think of it as color fields. Nothing is constrained, compartmentalized, stopped, or shaped. So it's sort of like a really flowy application, layer application, very lean, which that's the reason why I feel a solvent would work here. Very lean, so we can build on it with oilier layers. So here we go. I'm just going to do that. I just pick up a little bit of the burnt sienna. I make sure that it's not, um, there's not enough paint to remain on top of the paper, because I think the key here, it's a very, very liquid consistency, very liquid. And this is like now like such a red flag, right on the nose, just like exactly what I didn't intend to. But we'll see what happens with that edge. I don't want to think about it. So um, we'll see. We'll see how this ends up. And at the same time, I decide right now that I'm going to use the same color to wash also for the rest of the elements. We do believe that staining everything is a good way to move from the dry layer to the wet one. So everything gets, um, every blank area gets blocked. We feel like blank areas could become or could affect our decision making process. So that's the reason why. Okay. And then I will just do that too. Rags are our friends. So I'm gonna use the rag to just empty a little bit of the elements, some cast shadow. Just gonna try to build some darker nodes. I'm gonna try to be a little bit loose with my brush stroke. I think that's good. And then also some darker elements right here. So the paint here, it's a little bit darker. So I'm just gonna do that also. We'll see how that, we'll see. I don't know. I'm not sure of the visual um, uh, strength and value of this. Maybe I just chew more than I can bite. Um, I can always like diffuse things, but I think that's, yeah, I think that's what's gonna be right now. Right, so we're done. I am done with the imprimatura. I think that's it. I just don't wanna, I think that's it. Done with the imprimatura. So at this point, I know that I'm not gonna use the solvent except to clean brushes, and I'm gonna use the medium. And on I started like I switched to linseed oil. Like last week, I did um, safflower oil. I mean, I don't know if it's that important what kind of oil we use, but I want to try different oils and see what kind of viscosity I get, how they thin out the oil, if they become drippy or not. So safflower feels great because it's very clear, um, but perhaps it doesn't have enough body compared to the solvent-free medium. Um, so I should say that don't worry too much about what choice of media of liquids you have. Um, so we don't want to make this sort of like confusing and also saying that this is valid and this is not. You can paint with grapeseed oil. You can paint with olive oil if you wanted to. I mean, truly, if you don't have any oils, you can just go to the kitchen and get anything. You can paint with olive oil and any commercial cooking oil, corn oil. I mean, I don't know what's going to do with the painting, but you could. Sometimes they uh, put higher price on safflower oil than commercial cooking safflower oil, and I don't know how different it is or how refined it is. But you technically you could paint with any oil. We were just reading about how some painters pre technological revolutions in oil, they used lavender oil as a thinner and as a cleaning oil. So and it's still some brands produce lavender oil to use as substitute for solvent in a way. So anyhow, bottom line, today I'm going to try some linseed oil, very classic, very old school and traditional, and see what kind of viscosity I get. To me, oils feel very similar in that sense, except stand oil, and um, which is sort of like much thicker. But I don't want to use it right now because I need to feel like the paint has, um, yeah, the paint has some viscosity. I mean, some consistency. And by the way, oils do not alter the consistency of the paint. If you want something thicker, then the medium is a better choice. But okay, I'm just going to use an old hairy brush, and then I'm gonna move on to the next step. So we've always called this first step or this step first notes, and I think that's the terminology that we've used, and we've seen this in other places. So reading this article about terminology, this other name for maybe first notes, ébauche. Again, a classic, I'm reading right now, classic method for oils and a technique preferred by masters from the late Renaissance. We don't like this word, but yes. John Singer Sargent used ébauche. Corot, Turner, Velasquez, Rembrandt, a Bosch is the source of the dark to light rule in oils, but offers far more than that. So it's a little confusing. I don't know if that is only like darker to lighter or it applies to one stage. Um, oops, I just, but did you find anything about it, Jen?
I'm sorry, I don't know what we're saying.
Okay, never mind. Yeah, perfect. So
About which friend? I posted the article, but I'm sorry, was I supposed to
no, no,
do
no, no.
something?
It's totally fine. Yeah, I was just like talking about this Bosch stage that
Okay,
uh,
I'll look at it now.
yeah, I think, you know, some articles say that it's just darker to lighter, but then other articles, they're saying that it's when you actually use neutral versions of colors. Anyhow, I think we're just going to stick with first notes. And then maybe if we learn something down the road or in other sessions, we can just perhaps come up with a new way of defining it. So I'm just going to move from color fields to color blocking. Right now, I'm going to use just the oil, a little bit of paint. I'm going to study the color and I'm going to start applying, um, yeah, some of the elements. So just paint, a very small amount of oil. It's very important to also understand that the more oil you use in your mixture, the more drippiness you're going to get. It's just going to get really a little bit harder to manipulate or work down the road. So try to add some oil to create a consistency, but without being too oily. So what I'm going to do right now is go darker to lighter. So I'm just going to follow the color of the palette actually. Darker to lighter, and I think that is going to be that's going to be it. And I'll try, I'm going to be a little bit messy here, and then some, maybe just a yellow ochre. So I'm just going to go there and some acro.
Okay, does the name Jeffrey Hayes mean anything to you, Julio?
Yeah. Yeah. So I know
Do
what
we like
exactly what
him?
you're looking at. Yeah.
Okay.
First pass. Yeah. So I
Right.
think a specific type of underpainting, I think that also clarifies. It's not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily first notes, but it is an underpainting.
Right.
It is an underpainting.
Right. Yeah, it just yeah, it's an underpainting. Bosch needs to dry thoroughly before proceeding, according to him. It should be painted thinly enough that it can be completely dry to the touch within a week. Oh, this is those like 7 weeks of
Yeah. No.
that we don't do. It says rather than using black and white, as is the case with Grisaille,
Grisaille. Grisaille.
underpainting, and Bosch uses color. However, it's not the full saturated color of the final painting. Instead, it tends to be desaturated, done with duller, less intense mixtures, aka lower chroma.
Yeah. Okay, good. So it's just a technique. It's not a standard. It's different from imprimatura in the sense that it's a specific technique that it's a first note that uses the saturated colors. Let's put it this way. And when we do first notes, we actually start studying the color because I think I think that's important. So what I'm doing right now, I'm not using any tricks or anything because I'm doing, and that's one of the reasons why I love doing things from live. It's the fact that um, I have to interpret the color. So I'm just using this gray, and I'm focusing on the second focal point right now because it contains the darkest areas. And yeah, so this is what I'm doing. So I think that's okay. I think it's gonna be okay. I think it's gonna be okay. Of course, it's gonna be okay. It always will be okay. A little bit of oil, trying to keep the solvent away for now. And I'm using white paint already, but I do need to um, define the pockets in the palette. Uh, uh, I looking at the paintings yesterday. I love the fact that people did create a painting in negative spaces, either using like muddy notes or actually rendering those spaces. So I like that. We need to bring more color, but and then finally, I'm just going to use ecru, and I'm going to start bringing the dark notes, perhaps a little bit of the chromatic black, and I'll just bring some of the elements here. So darker to lighter, and then studying the color. Obviously, there's ecru here, and then there's a little bit of a darker note. So color blocks, I think that's it's important. Color blocks when we do first notes. Yeah, I think that's gonna work. I think that's gonna work. I'm glad I did. I'm glad I did the um, burnt sienna underpainting. Hello, burnt sienna underpainting. Yes, and then so I'm focusing on first notes. Um, I like the Ebosh approach. It would be an additional stage. The way we follow our evolution of the steps, um, and it's nice to learn about it because very frequently we mention that our staple palette contains the neutral versions of the primary colors. Yellow ochre being the neutral yellow, burnt sienna being the neutral red, and when we used Payne's gray, that being the neutral blue. So in a way, that would be interesting to work with. Perhaps one of the series could be practicing the ébauche step and do uh, first note using neutrals instead of like color. Okay, so I'm just continuing with the tube and adding a few notes to color block. So I'm not too concerned about um, I'm not too concerned about variations or details or none of it. I'm just yeah, I'm just having fun with the first notes. I think that's good. I think that's excellent. And then I'm gonna do first notes on the background. And I know that this is my third focal point. I'm gonna bring some because I've painted this board many times. I know that I have to combine yellow ochre, burnt sienna, and raw umber to create a note. So I like the higher contrast, so I'm gonna go for it. And I'm barely using oil, maybe just a little bit, the linseed oil, just a little bit, because I don't want it to be too runny. I think that's the idea. If I just soak up the paintbrush, the hairy guy, if I soak it up with linseed oil and then I mix the colors, because we're using a very limited amount of paint, it's just gonna feel like very runny. And I think yeah, I think that's the reason why people use mediums, because they don't feel like that. They give much more consistency. Hey, yeah, lots to think about. Um, but yeah, I think that's okay. Yeah, that's good. That's going well. I'm okay. My Dorian Gray fears are succeeding or whatever. I'm happy. I'm happy. But you just never know. You need to learn to metaphorically cover your stages, so you cannot see them, you cannot think about them, you just have to continue working. So it's very important, because sometimes the direction may appear that it's taking you to a disastrous place when it's really not. It's just getting built up. So it's important to not freak out when you are in the early stages of a painting. Easier said than done, because usually uh, um, things that are happening may trigger um, uh, thoughts or assessments or judgments that are not based in reality. They're not accurate. There's a lot of work that we still need to do. Compositionally, I think I'm okay. The color is changing. The consistency of the paint, it's not super oily. So linseed oil feels like a nice thinner almost. And this is much darker too. So I'm just gonna bring that color right here. So maybe I'll just use a bigger brush here, and then, boy, there's some blue mixed in there, which is good. I love when colors or pigments get mixed up. Okay, so still first notes. Um, and I do like the fact that, I'm just not doing edges on the board. So I think that's very good. Just gonna continue with that. That's very dark, but that's okay. I can make it lighter. And maybe this will be somewhat opened, or we'll see how I deal with this. But it may be, yeah, it may be not as, this would be a way of preventing something that it's a focal point to fall right on the edge, as if we didn't control it. Um, Treating that in a different way, not as focused, not uh, with as much detail. So I'm glad this happened, actually, because it's gonna encourage me to think about how to resolve that area that personally I don't. I feel like I want to avoid creating tension there, visual tension, or any kind of like friction. Okay, so I think that's good. There's a little bit more yellow ochre, and as with everything, the light changes even with this cloudy day. The light changes in the room, so things will be a little bit different as we move forward. And at the same time, our eyes are in the process of recalibrating to the color structure. So I know that I will discover more overtones, more differences in hue, and that's just going to give me an idea to do things much later. But I am doing first notes, so I think I have to be honest and in understanding where's the bar, what kind of expectation uh, do I can think of. And I think blocking out, creating more shapes, studying the color, and starting to find out variations on the edges, it's a good expectation, a realistic expectation. And again, I just think like that's very important, because we have high expectations. Sometimes our freak out moments come from having much higher expectations on stages that are not supposed to have that kind of expectation. And there's nothing wrong with a painting. Our work is to make sure that we understand that we need to find a balance between the stage that we're at and what kind of realistic expectations we should consider. Because I feel like that's when we're ready to push the panic button. We're doing a sketch and we're already like, oh my gosh, this is a disaster. Give me another paper or give me another canvas, or can I paint in the back? Can I use the back? Um, yeah, no, it's not the painting that needs um, exchanging. It's it's our sort of like approach. It's our revisit the expectations and see what can be adjusted. Okay, well, this is my first note stage. Perfect. Yeah, kind of like first hour. Uh, I knocked off the diseño, the imprimatura, and the first notes that are going to be called first notes. And we learn about the ébauche being a different form of first notes that is anchored on neutral colors and not saturation, which I love. But that would be for another experiment. Maybe a tutorial could be creating an ébauche of a portrait or an ébauche of a still life, but using just the three versions of the primary colors. And yeah, and I think um, yeah, we'll talk about it later because I got some images yesterday, and precisely they were just regarding this like as a stage. Is this a first note? Is this a second note? And because I was already reading about this terminology, I knew that was a perfect example of ébauche. First layers done with neutral tones. Okay, ready for my second notes. Actually, ready for my second notes. So I feel here with second notes, we go towards pixelation, and things um, also change in the sense that we decide which focal point will get the most detail, or the one, at least the one we're going to start with. Because up to now, when we did the sketch and the wash and the first notes, we treated the entire format. We went darker to lighter. We had a little bit of a structure and order, but the idea was not to localize our brushstrokes in one point. But at this stage, when we go to second notes, then we can make the creative decision, and it is a creative decision to choose which focal point or which area of our painting will land the first strokes and also have the most focus, which are two different things. I have to think about this actually. I have to think about this because part of me, because I like to work on peripheral areas, because I know that that saves me regrets of overworking things too much. Part of me wants to do the second focal point, the paper, the palette paper. But at the same time, I just feel like this is too underdeveloped, and the actual subject of this painting collection is the actual paint tube. What am I going to do? Okay, so I am deciding right now that I'm going to work on the paint tube and develop it a little bit further. So this is where I'm at. I'm starting second notes. I know that I will have to pixelate my brushstrokes. And I'm deciding that the focal point, the first focal point, will be the paint tube, the area that I'm going to work with. Perhaps it would be a good idea to be aware that I had this dilemma between this focal point or the palette, and I'm going to time myself. Sometimes it's a good idea to put time constraints so we don't feel sucked in one specific point and then everything drifts away from us. In that sense, I'm going to give myself maybe 10 minutes. I always feel like 10 minutes, it's a good chunk to do enough without uh, extending or getting cut up. So let's say 12:20. I'm just gonna do that mark, 12:20. Okay, let's do that. So first things first, I'm just gonna do, because I feel like that's part of the focal point. I'm gonna do the cast shadow. So I'll do the cast shadow, and I'm using even less oil right now. And I'm trying to make an interpretation right here. And I need some of the Periwinkle Radiant Blue note. Here we go. The cast shadow, um, or the, yeah, the cast shadow, it's important because it defines the object and also it paints the light direction. And the light's coming from behind. So with a pixelating kind of brush stroke, just gonna try to bring up that cast shadow. And on the cast shadow, I could see the umbra and the penumbra. So that means that the umbra being the darker area. So I'm just gonna bring some darker notes after I do the block, the first initial blocking. I see some umbra in some spots, not everywhere. And then the penumbra, yeah, I think that's okay. And maybe the antumbra in some spots. I'm just gonna diffuse this edge because as the shadow, the cast shadow goes away, uh, it loses a little bit of definition. Okay, so I think I got a version of the cast shadow, and that is helping. I feel that that's helping a lot actually, and I think that's part of. I consider the cast shadow of an object part of the whole package. All right, so I'm just gonna go for the cap. I'm gonna paint the cap. I'm using a small brush right now. I'll paint the cap. I use a combination of simplification and visualization, in which I imagine, I know I have the object in front of me, but I'm trying to visualize what can happen on that cap. And then I know that even though I'm using a tube, the ecru tube, because of the shadows and everything, I know the ecru, it's not really raw out of the tube. There's a little bit of darkness there. Okay, so that's what I'm doing, adding some pixelations uh, on the tube. I'm working on the focal point. There's some metallic elements, and I try, when I see something metallic, what I try to do, I try to isolate the area and try not to associate it with metal. Just try to find out what color is it. And I feel like it's sort of like a taupey gray. So I'm gonna bring some ecru and I'm gonna try, yeah, I think that's okay with the smaller brush. Okay, so I think that's working. I'm gonna continue with a different small brush, some white and ecru, and starting to build this other edge that feels really, really dirty. Now let me just bring the highlight points on this area. Okay, and then mix with some gray, I believe, some gray and some ecru. This is a good exercise, mostly ecru. There's a darker tone that falls down. So making some marks, some pixelating marks. I think that's building nicely. Let me try to find some dark spots. I need some pink actually, or salmon rose, radiant red, and let's keep confusing everything. Um, so yeah, I think I'm just gonna mix the two light neutrals because I feel there's something there that feels lavender. And that's also the reason why I like to paint from live, because I know that the colors that I see are going to be different than off of a photograph. I'll just bring some a little bit more gray right there. And reminds me of the sample paintings that we gathered. There was a sense of this area being almost abstract. Okay, so that's building. That's building. That's building. Okay, that's good. So do I need to make the design now? Maybe I do. So because it's so strong. So I'm gonna treat the tube. Pretend that the tube is actually the format of your painting right now. Forget, and that's something that helps me when I focus on focal points and second notes. I try to um, almost like take it apart. So right now, what I'm doing is just working on the tube. So I'm gonna pretend my painting right now, it's the size of the tube. And I think emotionally and psychologically, it just helps me uh, keep the focus. So that's what I'm doing. I'm not thinking of anything else. I have a plan, um, a tentative plan, and the plan is right now is spending whatever amount of time, 10 minutes until, yeah, working on the tube. That's what I decided to do. I'm doing the graphics just because there is um, much darker delineation there, and I feel I can just work with that. Yeah, I think that's good. Okay, excellent. So the tube has a cylindric feel in certain spots, and I need to work with the values, um, and that's already second notes. So yeah, that's what I'm doing, second notes. So I'm just gonna bring some darker elements around the edges to just give this idea of the tube having a cylindric illusion. And ooh, it's looking okay. Okay. All right. Goodbye, Dorian Gray. Watch, and then I'm gonna turn the corner, and then I'm just gonna see that. I don't know if you ever watched the 1970s Dorian Gray movie. It just terrified me when I was a kid. It's it's like a horror movie, but it's so fun to watch right now. And the main character was Burger. I forgot Burger. I'm sorry. It was that European actor. I think it's 1973, Jen. Uh,
Let me look it up. I haven't seen it.
yeah, so if you can find out, 1973, I believe, The Portrait of Dorian Gray. It's such a trip. It's so cool. And so at the end of the movie, when I'm just gonna give it away, if you know the story, when he stabs
Mhm.
the painting gets revealed, and yeah, it's just like really scary as a kid, because I think, as I want to say, at least about myself, but we're really impressionable to really gruesome images. And
Right.
right, Jen?
Yeah, I'm sure that knowing how you feel about blood and red and pink,
Yeah,
I'm sure that was really tough.
yeah, yeah. That was just super scary. That final painting, and that was a real painting, by the way. There was a British artist who did the work for the movie. I wonder where that painting is. I would love to see that painting, or who has it,
Hmm.
or I don't think it's in a museum, but there's definitely, it was a famous artist at the time who did the portrait for the movie. And I loved it at the same time because the main character, um, who was gay in real life, by the way, he is very flamboyant throughout the movie. It's just super. And I mean, as a kid, I just loved that. I just thought it was so cool. Um, Anyhow, and he was so handsome. I found him so handsome. I was like, oh my gosh, you know. And I love the clothes and but yeah, that painting, Jesus, it was just so hard to watch. Um, all right, time. Oh, that's it. So I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna drop the brush because I could spend the next or the remaining of the session just working on this because I'm getting so much out of it with a few minutes. I just did the shadow and the tube. I feel like it's going really well. But that was my strategy. I'm gonna stick with it. And I'm gonna now go to the second focal point. And I'm gonna give myself, I don't know, I just want to spend more time, but I'm gonna give myself like 10 minutes. And I'll use the medium brush. And what I'll do, second notes. So this is how I pick up, and this is how I try to organize myself. And um, organizing skills and time management are very important in the painting process or a creative process. It doesn't matter what medium or uh, how you express yourself. Um, so what I'm gonna do is know that this is gonna be the second focal point. I'm gonna spend 10 minutes here. Also, I recognize that this was the first wash on this area. So I know that I don't have to repeat things, but at the same time, I'm gonna use the first wash and I'm gonna build darker to lighter on this first wash with a pixelated brushstroke. Remember, second notes, pixelation, removing from color blocking to pixelation, and then widening the spectrum of tones. So gonna try to bring chromatic black on the edge. It's a little bit darker, and then just bringing some gray because the paper is foreshortened. So there's certainly a reflection of light. So I'm just gonna maybe some zinc white at the same time to give me that lighter area. I think that's going well. Okay, good. So, all right, I'm just gonna focus right now and then start doing the work right here. This also abstract situation or paper that I have right here. And again, trying to do darker first. And um, I'm liking this because I feel like I have an opportunity to be able to draw the tube. I'm so happy I dropped my brush at the 10-minute mark because right now, if I work on this area and along the tube, I will pretty much finish the tube by working only on the outside of the edges. So that makes me very, very excited. Makes me very excited. Um, so this is way too dark. So I'm just adding some ecru. I mean, I'm sorry. So uh, raw umber. And this raw umber, there's a chunk that spills outside of the palette. I want to paint the palette, the actual paper palette, but right now, but I'm just gonna focus on the darker. I need to practice restraint sometimes and follow a certain structure because I think it's all a combination of understanding um, uh, what I'm doing right now and sticking with a strategy that I know it's just gonna pay off, because my brush wants to wander around and then paint the rest of the palette. But I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna stick with the darker areas first, and then I'll just go to maybe the lighter ones. But I do want to stick with that, and especially because, as I said, there's something really cool about having the palette help me define the tube from the outside. I'm gonna watch that movie again tonight. That's so funny. All right, so I have like some white, a chunk of white right here. I think I'm just going to the polar opposite. Uh, Try to find the super light area. I think that's good. And I'm gonna start building the outside. It's a little bit lighter. The outside of the palette, because with second notes, one of the things that it's also important is to start refining the edges if you want them refined, obviously. Okay, so this is where I'm at right now. I'm just poking holes along the darker areas of the palette, because I want to define the palette a little bit more. And I'm concentrating the work on where the colors are. I think that's good. Bringing a little bit of oil because there's not enough fluidity. Yeah, I'm excited. This is good. I'm excited. I feel better. Oh, yeah. It's not too bad. It's not too bad. Okay, good. um, and by all means, I'm not trying to um, be the hair in this communal journey and just like run faster. Not at all. I think it's important. I make a distinction between complimenting myself and then just doing it within my own um, or within the strategy. So I just I just hope it's clear. If this needed any clarification, then when I compliment myself, I'm not just throwing flowers at myself. I'm just um, finding a nice conclusion to the premise that I just put forward for myself. Um, I'm trying to put something or think about the strategy, put it into play, stick with it, and then see if that worked or not. So when I compliment that, it's just the result of a process that initiated before I even started painting. It's not just to, yeah, it's not just to, um, I don't know what I was going to say, but yeah. So I hope that's important. I'm thinking in terms of like being on the other side, whatever that means, and saying, oh well, mine looks like crap. So I don't know what I should compliment myself about because this looks like so ridiculous. But that's not the mindset. Hopefully, the idea is that have a draft a plan in your mind. Think how you want to approach this. Um, Time yourself, organize, recognize where you're coming from. What's this focal point that you're working on? Uh, uh, what's the stage that that focal point has? Um, what kind of orderly brushstroke are you going to use? And then when you put all those things in place, try to find how those that kind of like work helped you to push things forward. I think it's important that it's not just a struggle to organize and manage and without any joy. So yeah. Okay, so I'm just gonna time wise. Oh my gosh, forget. Well, 10 minutes. Yeah, that's good. Sometimes the timing, it's good to just keep you aware, and also to um, be as efficient as possible, if I may say this. Okay, so there is definitely a little bit of darkness on the top. So I think when I go back um, to the first focal point, I'll know exactly what I'll need to do. But for now, I'm going to stick to my timeline. And I need more color. Do I need the color right now? I'm not going to use the color because I have yellow, I have red. I'm just going to reserve that. I feel like it's more important to just build a little bit more opacity with pixelated brushstrokes of sorts on this area, on the second focal point. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. Okay, so and then I'll just put the spots of color, the splashes of color, yeah, almost as texture. But not now. I don't want to. I still need to do a lot of work. Let's just put it this way. So, Jen, did you find a movie by any chance, or I don't know? I mean, the year, the stuff,
Yeah.
the actor. What was his name?
Let me go back to the find the painting,
Oh, so I
which
think.
is at Art Institute of Chicago.
Oh, that painting is.
Mm-hmm.
No way.
Well, um, maybe I don't know. There's a painting at Arts
Okay.
Institute of Chicago, um,
Oh.
but I don't. Maybe it's not the one that you're
I
thinking.
mean, there were different versions, I believe, of that movie. I mean, for sure. I'm not sure. Um,
The one that I posted is by Ivan Albright.
oh,
So, and it was so it's probably not from the movie because it was painted in 1943.
oh,
So
whoa.
that doesn't make a lot of sense. But
Okay.
it's pretty gruesome, just to warn you. But I posted it in the
Okay.
out. The actor that plays Dorian Gray is Shane Bryant,
Which version?
the 1973.
Oh,
Is that not right?
yeah. I know. I think that was a different,
It's a different one.
or maybe a
So
different character.
okay, so the guy that played Basil is Charles Aidman. The guy that plays Watson is Nigel Davenport.
Okay, so it's a different version. It's
Okay.
definitely a different version. Um, I'll
That
find
okay.
out.
Let's see. There's maybe one from 1970.
Yeah.
Darlene's saying there's one from 1945 starring George Sanders. Does that sound right?
No, it's like it was later. Yeah.
Okay. So then there's there's one from 1970, and that cast is yeah. Okay, this is the one you're thinking. Helmut Berger.
That's right.
Yes. Okay, so it's 1970, but there is a 1973.
Oh
So
my gosh, I'm gonna do like a marathon tonight of going through.
and then Basil's played by Richard Todd. Watton's played by Herbert Lom.
Wow. And that painting from the 1970.
Okay, so
Yeah, and you can post it. I mean, it's totally fine. And it's an amazing painting. And
is it the poster?
oh, I don't think so. No, I don't
Okay.
think so. The poster is
See,
Helmut Berger, who was, yeah, he wasn't at his prime, I think, then, or maybe he was. I don't know, because he did a lot of movies or a few movies with Elizabeth Taylor and stuff like that. So he was a pretty iconic actor at the time, I would say, or one of the heartthrobs, at least in Europe. Um,
okay, is it a painting where he's wearing like a purple scarf?
yes,
Okay, all right, let me
yes.
see if I can
Maybe
find
the
it.
painting, the beginning, yeah, when he does the self-portrait.
Okay.
Yeah, I think obviously, and he wears the purple scarf. Yeah, but then at the end, the final painting. Yeah. So, all right. So done with the second notes for now. On the second focal point, I am really pleased because I feel like the strategy that I put in place, that I crafted or I drafted in my mind, and I timed, it has worked. It allowed me to develop the end of the tube a little bit further. It's becoming a little bit more of an illusion of a palette and the tube. I know that I'm gonna get there another round, in fact, many rounds, but for now, I'm just really pleased. So, uh, having gone through the first focal point, the second focal point, naturally, I'm gonna dedicate another 10 minutes, and I will work on what I consider the final focal point, which is the backdrop of the whole thing. And my eyes, it's just so amazing. I have no idea if it's because the light or not, but it just looks like a totally different color. It doesn't look like that. I put too much red, and it's much more bleached. So 12:36, oh my gosh, that's like, okay, it will put me at the end of the session mostly. So this is what I'm going to do. Actually, it would be a good conclusion. So I could just talk about this step, and kind of like, before I open the same cycle again, first focal point, second focal point, and third point, I'm going to conclude my session with work on the third focal point. I think that's a good way to just find a good closure. And the first thing that I need to do is I need to revisit this color. This color, it's not really what I put. There's way too much red. So I need to bring some more of a bleached tone, and definitely more gray. Oh yeah, this is the tone. This is the tone. So I'm just going to actually start with the lighter notes. And the first thing is kind of like closing the gap. I love this sort of like gap. I mean, I don't love it. I need to close. I love the edge. So I'm just going to close the gap. And maybe what I'll do also, I need to I'll do it with some zinc white because I don't want to actually add any extra elements. But with the zinc white, I will just close the gap so it just feels that it's filled without getting anything added. Uh, yeah, and I'm using a medium brush slightly. It's not super big, but since the area it's slightly larger, and some oil. Okay, so here we go. And also on the other side. I think that's important. I'm going to do these two sides first. Close the gap as well. Um, Yeah, let me bring some zinc white on that edge too, just sort of like create or fill the gap. And on the next note, um, I think I'm gonna leave this area not as developed, so I'm happy with that. Um, and then I'll just continue. I think there's a darker spot right here that it doesn't feel super red, so I'm just gonna bring this. Whoops, maybe a little bit too much. Let me just pixelate it. Again, doing second notes, some pixelation um, first. And I think with this, I'm just gonna use the rag and diffuse some of the knots on the wood. And what I'm gonna try to do also is um, uh, I'm going to make this a little bit more, a little blurrier. So I don't want the backdrop to have way too much definition. So I think this is gonna be okay actually, a little blurrier. And right here, medium brush, and I need to definitely almost like glaze something on top. I need to glaze something on top because the color is way too red. That's good. Way too red. So I'm just toning down the redness of this. It's just amazing how my eyes right now recalibrated to the color of the wood, and I see it so differently. So I'm just gonna narrow this separation of the paper with the wood, which I think that could be a nice touch. This slightly, this umbra underneath the paper. There's a little bit of an umbra underneath the paper that makes, it's really playful. So I'm just gonna keep that. And yeah, let's just kind of like continue. Maybe the background, I just want to feel like this is not as red. And that's going to help me because I know that higher temperature colors come forward. So I like it. So already, by bleaching it out, blanching it, slightly boiling that color, um, and removing the temperature, I think, um, it just sets up an order that brings a little bit more attention to the main focal point. So I think that is working also. I think that is working. So again, this is what I'm doing second notes, and I'm just concentrated on the negative space. And using some oil, I'm using slight transparency because I don't want to repaint what I've done. I just want to tweak the color of it. And I feel, by creating a slightly, uh, and by the way, because I use the solvent at the beginning, that layer is dry. So I'm not really doing like wet on wet. I could just, yeah, paint really over it. But yeah, the transparency, I think it's helping. Yeah, I think so. Good. So I'm just gonna continue, and and then maybe just closing the gaps. Okay, let's do this. I'm just gonna close the gaps on the edge because I think that is important. So perhaps this is I'm working on between the second focal point and the background, and I'm just concentrating on that edge because I feel like I need to fill it up, make sure that absolutely, absolutely, except maybe for this area, but I need to fill it up. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so now it's starting to get a little bit fun. um, a little bit. I'm not saying anything about. I don't want to jinx it or whatever it's called. Just applying. Yeah, I think that's okay. I'm using just want to remove that crease on the paper. The fold, it just read like a fold and it's not really a fold. So I just wanted to flatten that and then maybe bring some, there is a little bit of a crease. It's actually a shadow on this part right here. Oh, I should focus on background. I'm just going over already, breaking my own strategy. So let's just focus on the background and then just build that edge. I could work on that area of the painting on the edge. Actually, this is lighter. This area, it's a little bit lighter. And there is a little bit of an umbra underneath. So I'm just gonna work on that on this side of the paper. So it's barely noticeable. So I'm just gonna bring a little bit of that underneath the paper. And at the same time, the edge has a little bit of white. So I'm just gonna, on this edge, I'm just gonna bring, are you eating something? I hope not. Okay, so this is, there's a lightness on this side. There's a lightness on this side. I think it's still a little bit lighter. Um, and I love when the light kind of like changes and I see different values. So I'm just gonna work on that area. Yeah. Okay, so I want to see what happens if I just push this back. I'm gonna buff it by making circular movements. Yeah, because I want to make sure that doesn't feel strokey. Because I feel like if I can get this a little bit more flattened and pushed back, I could just bring more definition on the paper itself. Yeah, I think that's working. So I'm just trying different techniques or styles on the brushstroke. And one of them is sort of like creating almost like a narrow uh, field of whatever the expression, depth of field. Yes, right, Jen? Is it depth of field? I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay. Yeah. So on
Yeah.
the actual tube, so just like smoking this area on the back, and just leaving this a little bit more strokey. Um, I just wanted to harmonize this sort of like diagonal flow when you look at the painting, because of the angular elements of the paper and the way the tube is on the paper. It almost feels like there is this path on the surface that it goes from closer right here to further away. So I just wanted to accentuate that, or push it back a little bit more by making it like smoke here. I still feel like it's a little bit too red, and but I don't want to overwork that area. I don't want to overwork it. So perhaps what I'm going to do though, because I still feel like it's part of that third focal point, is to keep working on the actual edges of the paper, just on the edges. So I feel like there's something there that I could just work and that could give me a lot of definition without actually working too much on the paper. Like for example, there is here on the edge, there's much lighter corner. So I'm gonna make this much lighter. And it's also very irregular. And at the same time, there's a slight umbra. Umbra, it's sort of like the point of contact, the darker. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I think that's good. I think that's good. Um, and some slightness. It's just so amazing to work on a peripheral area. I still feel like it's an important focal point, but just working on that area, it just helps build. I'm just directing or helping the viewer. And in this case, I have to be both the painter and the viewer to just build the entire or construct the entire scene with minimal visual elements. Just gonna follow the same path, and this is just gonna spill over. So I'm just gonna bring some of that gray and spill it over a tad more. There's something cool about that. It doesn't fill up the paper, or it just spills over. Okay, I think that's good. Um, I am going to continue. Yeah, there is a little bit of lightness right here. And also there is some on the other side. So let me concentrate on also this lightness, because I feel like there's something really nice about the highs and lows on the wood. And I'm going to concentrate on this section of highs and lows, not too much on the background. Perhaps bring some of the lighter note right here. And then also perhaps working on that edge at the same time. So how am I going to solve this? To me, this is a problem. There's a problem right here. Compositionally, there is a problem. First of all, it's unresolved. So there's still like dry paper underneath that's blank. And I just feel like, this is my predicament right now, my pickle. If I do the same thing that I did on this edge, it's just gonna, I'm afraid it may just feel that I tried to dodge the compositional conflict that I put myself in. If I do it exactly or with much definition, I feel like this, it's just going to feel compositionally not the way I want it. I just don't want to, um, I want to give space, visual space to the viewer to wander around. It's not me. I don't like to interrupt the flow. I don't like to slow things down for the viewer. So I'm going to try first to see what happens if I just deal with it in the same way. And by saying the same way is completely diffusing that edge. I'm just going to even expand it. Yeah, that's not too bad actually. I don't know how I feel about it, but um, I think aesthetically, maybe I just need to also, because anything that has high contrast becomes recognizable. Anything that has high contrast is sort of like a target for our eyes. So this has high contrast. There's, first of all, too much red, and this red competes with the red on the paper. Um, it's not really well integrated. It's just one trumpet. It's one trumpet in this that's creating discord or disharmony. I don't know if that word exists or not, but so I need to bleach this, tone it down. Look, immediately, it's just sort of like gets a little bit out of the way. It doesn't become that target for the eye, and that's much more important than the amount of definition that we put on a painting. How you direct as a director, a visual director, how do you create the visual conditions for the viewer to have the experience that you want them to have on your painting? And of course, that is a relative statement because every viewer will see it differently. But it is important to um, clear the space, or be as honest as you can in regards of how you want to direct the visual elements to make sure that the viewer has an experience um, that you want them to have. Um, if you don't contemplate that and you only think detail, 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 then it's just going to put you in an inferior position because the only thing that may come across will be your craft. And if that's not to the level that the viewer expects, your painting may fail as something that the viewer may use to find enjoyment or stimulation. So replication and high detail, it's not a guarantee that a viewer will find your painting interesting. So yeah, I think that for now worked. I mean, there's a maybe too much of a similarity between um, this corner and that corner. So perhaps I'm not going to have any other choice but to also move this. Uh, uh, I'm just going to move it a little bit. I'm going to open a little, unstitch it a little bit more because I don't want this to feel like, okay, I did it on the right, I'm going to do it on the left. And I already have a heavy weight with the darks right here. So more reason to unstitch that edge. Yeah. And let's not forget, this is the main focal point. So this should feel complementary to this. So that's another way of like assessing this. Does this help in finding more of a focal point here? Because there are different layers when a viewer sees the painting, depending on how much time. They may just spend like a fraction of a second and then next move to the next painting. But if we provide a harmonious way to unpack each layer of the painting, then maybe they'll just spend time saying, "Oh, well, now I noticed that the artist intentionally um, unstitched." I mean, they're not going to say that obviously, but they just created more abstraction right here. Yeah, I think I'm just going to unstitch this even more. All right, I'm not going to get carried away because that's a lot of unstitching. And I think, yeah, I think that's enough. I think that's enough. I'm really happy about the cast shadow. I think that's really good. But I feel like now I just want to go back to the first focal point, and I still want to give myself some time. For some reason, I think I miscalculated my time management and math are not really accurate because I feel like I spend a little bit of time with the first focal point, a little bit of time on the second, and I have like massive amount of time on this area right now. I did something wrong, but time wise, but it may be to my benefit. Um, I think I'm also going to taupe taupe out this red on the corner. I just feel like I don't want any accent of color on the vignette area of the painting. I'm gonna try to make this almost or romanticize it, or sort of like yeah, can I use that word? Maybe, I'm not sure, but yeah, I just wanna, yeah, automatically that brings more attention to this. So I just took the knob, the saturation knob on the vignette corner, and turn it down dramatically. What does it do? It's just um, moves the this location right here, moves it lower in the multi-layer effect that I have on the painting. So this right now doesn't kind of like come forward too early. I think that was a good decision. Was this realistic? No, I just it's not even contained. It's not a detail. There's no texture. It's not a shape. But yet I feel like it contributed to the elevation of the overall tone. And these are the decisions that are crucial. This is what's hard on a painting, to nail the proportions. I'm sorry, it doesn't impress me. It's not, okay, fine. It's like seeing someone do a million flips. Okay. Or someone have an amazing body. Okay. But it's not impressive. I'm not sold, although maybe I'm lying. um, anyhow, all right. Yeah, it's something more. It's the thoughtfulness of deciding that the layering of elements needs to be reordered, and to be kind and generous enough to know what needs to be pushed back in order to make other things move forward. That's what really stands out on a painting, at least for me. That thought process, that management, that you know, yeah, that idea of coordinating the different elements to try to make them all work together for a single purpose. Um, so yeah, we started like a few minutes after, so I think I'm just gonna do my final. This is like a little bit too weird. It probably needs to get cropped. We'll see. I don't know if that's it's like a weird gap. This may not survive. Um, but I'm gonna stop here. So I'll do a little bit of a final recap. Um, I absolutely loved going through this process. I learned, in the art statement of the series, we try to say that this is a kind of like a self-portrait, and recognizing that the material, it's really us. And it was sort of like a way of trying to seduce with the message. But now in retrospect, I think that that's exactly what happened here. First of all, making the connection between how to layer things with who I am, or I intend to be. I think to me that was really fun. Um, Timing the amount of detail was also very good. Simplifying the focal points worked for me tremendously. I feel like the painting feels original and classic at the same time, which is something that I always love about um, a piece of work. Um, I'm calling this based on all the expectations and all the metrics that I put on it, a success. So I'm really, really happy. So I'm going to take a picture of this. We're going to take a 10-minute break. This was extremely complex. So I mean, it's always so much fun when we sort of like exchange and share, and please don't feel obligated, but we all learn from each other and we all get inspired. And that's the reason why doing this together makes our work much better. But I know that, or I'm thinking that you may have had like a lot of like complex issues to deal with, and this is possibly a lot of triggers. Perhaps some Dorian Gray moments where the tube just turn into something you didn't expect, and so I'm just saying this because we understand that the stages are very on the early side. There's so much more that I want to do, and I will do. Um, but yeah, let's just take a photo, upload it. Let's get together. I just can't believe how fast this went. It's so nice not to be checking anything during this time and be really truly self-reflective. So 1:13, it's our time to reconvene. Take the time to, number one, stretch. Very important. Stretch, drink liquids, very important. I forgot about my bodily needs in that sense. Use the restroom. Sorry to say that. It's a reminder to do it myself. And yeah, eat something if you have something at hand or whatever. And then 113, let's just reveal our stages. All right, we'll see you at 113.